Thank you, Mike, and all you patriots. This is my new book. It's been out for a few months. This is what I do in my spare time. For me, history, whether I'm working with my filmmaker doing documentaries or writing articles and books, it's a labor of love for me because I care about South Jersey history, in my case, Cape May County history, but South Jersey, New Jersey, and American history. And I wrote down a few notes that I would like to share with you so I don't miss anything. And then I'll read a letter or two. My new book contains 42 letters with accompanying bios that chronicle life in Cape May County since the earliest European settlement. I put together this book to tell the story of my ancestors and their neighbors in their own words. The 42 letters span 300 years and reveal the events in their lives, the trials and tribulations they faced, the things of which they cared enough to write about. Of particular interest to me are the changes in dialect and the manner of speech over 3 centuries, including the difference in speech among South Jersey natives of the same generation. It was a relatively easy project for me, selecting interesting letters, transcribing them as close to the original as possible regarding punctuation and spelling, and researching and writing a biography covering the characters in each letter and the events and issues discussed. Interestingly, by chance, through no effort of mine, in at least 20 of the 42 letters, either the author or the recipient is a direct descendant of one immigrant couple, John and Alice Hand, who around 1635 immigrated from Kent County, England, and settled in East Hampton, Long Island. Another half dozen or so were married to descendants of that couple, including the patriot for whom this chapter is named, Colonel Richard Summers. These phenomena can be explained by life in a relatively isolated community on a peninsula of roughly 10 miles wide and 35 miles long. A county that had 70 European families by the year 1700, in which 11 of those households had the surname Hand. You can figure that one out. Of interest to this group of patriots, my book contains 6 Revolutionary War era letters, and I would like to read a few of them. Those letters give a behind-the-scenes glimpse of those tumultuous times. In their own words, we can experience their thoughts put to paper during what may be the beginning of the greatest political experiment of all time. And the first letter actually is 10 years after the war. As I say in my co-author and I's privateer book, Cape May Privateers, or Cape May Neighborhood rather, most of the movers and shakers were gone a decade after the war. The guys that were making things happen were in their 40s or 50s. By 10 years later, 1791, along with Ben Franklin, who was a lot older than most of these characters, the slates being clean, so they didn't live long to see the fruits of their labors. This is a letter from Phoebe Stillwell, the second wife of Lieutenant Colonel Enoch Stillwell, to his brother-in-law, and now her brother-in-law, Colonel Richard Summers of Summers Point. Dear Sir, sorry this should inform you of the heavy loss we have met with in losing an affectionate husband, a loving brother, and a tender parent. He departed this life this morning about half after 7 o'clock, and his dying request was, and hoped in God that you would prove an affectionate guardian to his helpless offspring, and look into his affairs, and settle them if possible. He died without a will, and was at times very delirious, but was so that he knew he was advancing to the verge of eternity, and the only thing that seemed to trouble him was his children. He met his fate with that seeming fortitude as become a Christian, but still had a desire to live. My mind is in such a state that I hardly know what I am about. If any blemishes should appear in this short but truly affecting epitaph, hope you will excuse. Take the matter home to yourself and judge of my unfortunate situation in leaving so tender a companion. I beg you will inform Sister Griffin, that's Sarah Stillwell Griffin, wife of this and pray let me hear from you by the bearer, Mr. Benjamin Oram. I am, dear sir, your affectionately, Phoebe Stillwell. This somber letter recorded the death of my fifth great-grandfather, Enoch Stillwell of Cape May County, to his brother-in-law, Richard Summers Sr., who, though a native of Great Egg Harbor, Gloucester County, was probably living in Philadelphia at the time. During the Revolution, Lieutenant Colonel Enoch Stillwell served as a field officer in the Cape May Militia. He was also one of the region's most successful privateer captains while serving as master of the privateer schooner Hawk, 10 guns and 50 men. He and his crew captured the British brig Lion and schooner Henry in 1779. Both vessels were laden with rum, Madeira wine, and other supplies, and were likely the most valuable prizes taken in the Delaware Bay, Jersey Coast region during the war. Ironically, Phoebe Stillwell's letter to her husband's brother-in-law, Richard Summers, is the only document known to this author showing that Enoch had remarried after the death of his wife, Sarah Savage Stillwell, 5 years earlier. His late wife, Sarah, was the mother of all of his children, and no marriage record has been found for Enoch and Phoebe, at least not in New Jersey. In her note to Richard Summers, Phoebe expressed her husband's dying wishes that his brother-in-law would see to his children's welfare. She also requested that Enoch's sister, Sarah Stillwell Griffin, be notified of his death. Sarah was married to Captain Moses Griffin, who was another of the Cape May privateer captains. As it happened, Richard Summers did become the legal guardian of most of Enoch Stillwell's children. His son, Savage Stillwell, would become a prominent Philadelphia shipowner and merchant. Daughter Martha Stillwell would marry Joseph Hildreth in 1789, my fourth great-grandparents, and with whom he had a daughter, Lydia, in 1790. Martha died a year later, leaving a husband with an infant to care for. 2 years later, her younger sister, Anne, would marry Joseph Hildreth, raise her infant niece, and bear 6 children by him. That wasn't that uncommon then. You know, for people had a house full of kids and they got married out of necessity a lot of times. And often in my travels, as a side note, I'll see, even in my own family, I'll see a widow that married again. When she died, she was buried next to her first husband. It's very common. We even have one case in Cape May County where the second wife purposely planted herself between her husband and the first husband. Common surnames. But anyway, if anybody has any questions about that, speak up. If you can stand it, I'll read one more letter. This is a little more technical. This is by a man by the name of Jesse Hand. I noticed online today a lot of DAR members have used him as a patriot, though he never fired a shot. He was a politician. But he had a lot more to lose than most of the people involved in that conflict. This is Jesse Hand, Esquire, to Governor William Livingston, April 8, 1782, right in the middle of the war, or towards the end of the war, I should say. Let me see here. And you'll love a lot of the earlier letters have real flowery language at the time. So these guys really knew how to put on the dog when they wrote a letter. Worthy Sir, I have received yours of the first instant, together with a commission for Captain Hand, that's Colonel Elijah Hand, for which please accept my acknowledgement of the favor. I am sorry to understand our magazine is in so bad condition at this time of need. I hear Mr. Townsend got no ammunition, so that we must have recourse to our former method for supply. This day there has been a most severe cannonade in our bay by some vessels, about 10 or 12 in number, I have heard on our coast since the war. Who they were or in whose favor it ended, we have not heard, but from appearances, they were some New York privateers. That's Tory vessels. Among some merchantmen, and I fear the latter mostly are all taken. One ship run aground and was boarded and got off from a brig. We think the brig might be the Fair American. That was a privateer vessel. The Hyder Alley has not yet come down the bay. If she was, she is not a force by any means sufficient for the combined force of the New York cruisers, as there is 4 or 5 of them who take almost everything that attempts to pass. Your Excellency will please excuse me for the trouble of this letter, as the bearer, Mr. Joseph Edwards, anxiously requested it in the favor of his unfortunate son, who was lately taken up for a deserter in Trenton. This young man's case is most certainly very hard, as he had done all in his power to make up for his deficiency in the Army, having given a fellow a large sum of money to take his place, who run away before he could deliver him, and afterwards gave a sergeant 6 half Jones to enlist a man in his room, which he thought was done, as there was a man enlisted with the money. And if good offices in a deserter merits favors, he may be entitled to some, having been so extremely active in distressing the refugees, that's Tory privateers, and annoying the common enemy no less than 2 express boats from Clinton to Cornwallis was captured by him. One, the mail was saved and is said to have was of great consequence, so that it is much to be doubted whether his service in the Army would have been half so much consequent to the United States as it had been in the present case. Not that it would in future be to this state if he could be set at liberty. I know he does not fall within your Excellency's line, but as I would likewise know your Excellency interest in the matter would do a great deal with the gentlemen of the Army, with whom I have scarce a slight acquaintance. I would therefore pray in behalf of the distressed Mr. Edwards that your Excellency would interpose your kind offices in his favor. Give me leave to subscribe myself, your Excellency's sincere friend and very humble servant, Jesse Hand. So he's covering 2 topics. What he didn't know, the cannonade he heard, the battle he heard down in Cape May, the Hyder Alley had arrived, and it was a rare instance where an American privateer, a large one, maybe 130 guys on it, beat a British warship and towed it up to Philadelphia. In my little bio about it, you'll hear that. The author of this letter, Jesse Hand, was a major political figure in Cape May County before, during, and after the American Revolution. He served as a delegate from Cape May to the 2nd New Jersey Provincial Convention, the Committee of Public Safety from 1777 to 1781, was a member of the state legislature from 1779 to 1784. During the war years, he was also the agent of forfeited estates for Cape May County, charged with disposing of any properties owned by Tories or British nationals. It is safe to say that Jesse Hand was a natural leader, but he was also very well connected. His wife, Sarah, was the daughter of Aaron Leeming Jr., the wealthiest man in the county. Their daughter, Sarah, was married to Constance Summers, the oldest son of Colonel Richard Summers of neighboring Great Egg Harbor. Jesse's not-so-distant cousins included Elijah Hand, Nicholas Stillwell, and Enoch Stillwell, all 3 militia colonels and privateer captains. In addition to running his plantation on the seaside in Middle Township, Jesse Hand also owned a salt works during the Revolution with his father-in-law and Aaron Leeming and merchant John Holmes. He and John Holmes were also co-investors in privateer vessels. Hand's letter to the governor of New Jersey reveals details regarding the war effort and goings-on in South Jersey during the Revolution. He first reports on the lack of military stores on the Cape, then gives an account of what would become known as the Battle of the Delaware Bay, in which the American privateer Hyder Alley, with 16 guns, defeated and captured the British warship General Monk with 24 guns. Jesse Hand reported on the naval battle in real time, though he was not aware that the Hyder Alley had indeed reached the Cape and was one of the two major combatants in the fight. Well more than half of the letter is devoted to pleading the case of Joseph Edwards, Jr., one of Cape May's young privateer captains who had been arrested for desertion, although Edwards had paid two different individuals to serve in his place. Hand points out that Captain Edwards' service as a privateer far outweighed anything he could have done as an enlisted soldier towards the Patriot cause. So you can see there's a lot of, what I love about this, I find, doing research, I find so much history that isn't acknowledged. You know, these letters are just two examples. If you go in Norm's Atlantic County Historical Society, you can see Colonel Richard Summers' documents. He was the banker for the Cape May and Atlantic County privateers. But there's, you know, it's like being a rock musician and thinking all the good songs are already written. Well, they're not. And there's a lot of great stuff to research and write about out there.
Yeah, there is.
And how were you able to accumulate those letters? How were they preserved?
Yeah, some of the letters I actually own. And again, I chose 42 letters that had some interest to them, not letters such as I would have wrote as a kid. Dear Mom, how are you? I'm fine. Love you, son. Each letter has, again, this book covers 300 years of Cape May County history. And so, you know, the last letter is 1960. But some are owned by me, some are owned by other private collections, some are on the internet. The Phoebe Stillwell letter is particularly important to me. He's my fourth or fifth great-grandfather. He married a Savage and Daniels girl, two old names in Atlantic County and Cumberland County. And in his, he didn't have a will. A lot of guys with money, you'd be surprised how many didn't bother to write a will. And his wife died, and when he died 5 years later, his executor is Phoebe Stillwell. He doesn't have a daughter named Phoebe. He doesn't have a sister named Phoebe. A gentleman contacted me, a Philadelphia stockbroker type. He had gone to an auction of ephemera in Philadelphia, antique paper documents. And he saw a handful of, a box with a bunch of documents that had hand in them. And he remembered his grandmother said, his mother said she had a hand grandmother, which half of my county has. And he bought the stuff and he shared it with me. So there's an example. And I don't need to have the original. He sent me high definition copies, though I've offered to, if he ever wants to part with it. You know, I'm a collector of art. But some of the letters are, you know, in the Historic Society of Pennsylvania, they have a lot of great Revolutionary War hero records from South Jersey. And so they're from various sources.
You know, Jamie, you just don't know what's going to show up tomorrow.
That's right.
I have a distant cousin in the Leeds family who lives in Upper Township. Yeah. Strange creature. Yeah. Had been in the DAR. Was at one time the regent of the Ocean City chapter, their last regent. She invited me to her house, and I was allowed to photograph all sorts of receipts for Jeremiah Leeds keeping cattle on Absecon Island, which he essentially owned all of Atlantic City. But the one thing she would not be photographed, and I decided I couldn't be sneaky and do it. She has a letter, a copy of a letter that he made, that he wrote 2 days before July 4th, 1776, to George Washington when he was in New York. And she had it mounted on the wall, probably damaged it by doing that. But she's so weird. I mean, I don't know any other way to say it. She's not, the DAR is not the weird part. It's just, and now I can't even get her to answer a phone call to ask her if I can, and And she never came back to another DAR meeting after that.
And we were not unhappy about that.
But if she ever decides you find her again, that letter is framed in her house. And I would love, just if I could get a photograph of it.
But
God forbid.
Norm,
something
I should counsel you, Norm, you might want to refrain from using the name Leeds and the term strange creature in the same sentence. Because that conjures up images of the Jersey Devil. But does anyone have any questions from me? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just noticed I happen to know a Jesse Hand south of Belleville. I'm going to ask him if he's tied to this.
Yeah.
But he was charged with disposing of any properties owned by Tories or British nationals. Wonder how that really worked.
Well, I just helped a woman write the first ever history of North Cape May and Town Bank, down where the ferry terminal, little Cape Lewis Ferry Terminal is. And Cape May County had no Tories, unlike these ponies up here. You had were half and half.
Why are you pointing at that?
But John Hatton was the Royal Customs Inspector based in the Port of Salem and Cohansey, but it also covered Cape May County. His house still stands in Swedesboro. He bought 2 plantations right in the heart of North Cape May right now, and Jesse Hand auctioned them off maybe 1784, I believe, after the war. And the oddest thing, there's no deed recorded for it. The guy that bought it, we know Hughes bought it. We know who built a house there or lived in the same house that Hatton owned. There's not always deeds for things, unrecorded deed. And the only reason we know that is because it was advertised in probably one of Ben Franklin's papers. Yeah. By the way, this is Steelman. Is the Steelman here? Right here. Captain Joseph Edwards Jr. By the way, the Edwards and the Hands and the Hildreths, a lot of those families came from East Hampton together. Joseph Edwards, that letter mentions that he captured 2 vessels with documents from Cornwallis going back and forth. But I also found advertisements in the papers at the time where they were auctioning off vessels that he captured. And one of them he captured with Darius Corson and James Steelman. So that's one of your privateer ancestors, I'm sure. Okay. Well, thank you, folks.
Jamie brought some of his books to sell. He also brought some of his Cape May Navy books, if anybody's interested. So he does have books for sale, if anybody's interested. Just again, our next meeting is... All right, October 12th, Thursday, October 12th is our next meeting, and again, it'll be Julie Rose Driscoll about colonial clothing, Red War era clothing. So, if we want to do the SAR recessional,